The thing is, probate, it's basically a lawsuit that's filed against your family for the benefit of your creditors. Because one of the primary purposes of probate is to make sure that the people who you owe money to get paid. So it's this public record anyone can see. There are companies that data mine that information. Anyone can come in and file a creditor claim. This person owed me money. And maybe you did owe them money, maybe you didn't, but your family's going to have to litigate that.
Hello, everyone. Rick Albert here with another episode of The Key to the City of Angels. I'm super excited to talk about a very important topic that not everybody, I guess, wants to talk about, I think is a good way to put it. So who better not to have it than Cecilia Amo? Thank you so much for coming on. You're with AMO LAW Legacy Planning. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So you could practice law in like so many different fields, from criminal to tax to whatever. How did you get into the trust and kind of legacy estate planning space?
So it's not actually a field of law I thought I would get into. I started my career actually as the first Asian attorney to be hired at Johnny Cochran's law firm. So right out of law school, I was working on some high profile cases. I was really a trial attorney for the beginning of my career. And I never really thought about estate planning as anything very interesting because as many people, I thought estate planning was just about documents. But what it really is about designing outcomes. And something about that just like really resonates with me, that instead of just helping a family in the aftermath of tragedy, I can actually help families to plan for things to go right in a time when everything else is going wrong. And, that's when I titled my new book, Your After Credits Scene, because it's like once a movie is done, the credits roll, and then you kind of see that little sliver of what happens after. And that's what estate planning is you're planning your after credit scene. Is your family going to be stuck in court? Are they going to be scrambling to find things, or are they going to be able to focus on honoring your legacy and remembering you?
And I do have to say, because I do have friends in the legal space. So kudos to you to be able to switch from trial to another. And I've heard as an attorney, once you get into something, it's actually hard to make the move because you start building that reputation in a specific category.
Yes, it is. It is hard, definitely. But I really felt the pull. I was very fortunate to meet my mentor, who is building a network of heart-centered attorneys nationwide, and just really kind of flipping the script on how estate planning has been done traditionally. So instead of focusing on, a lot of the industry is very documents focused, but, like I said, designing outcomes, building lifetime relationships with people, making sure plans actually work instead of just throwing some paper in a drawer and hoping for the best.
Yeah. So tell me, what is the difference between what's been done in the past versus what you're currently working on?
So I think the typical experience that most people have had from what I've, as I talk to people, they come to me, their attorney has retired or passed away, or their plan is 10 years old. They called a firm, they got a price, they gave their information. Maybe they met with the attorney for, 15 minutes. And then the attorney gave them documents and they signed them, and that was it. Then nothing else happened. For me, I counsel my clients through the asset alignment piece, which is one of the 3 reasons I think plans most often fail. And what I mean by that is once documents are signed, that's just the starting line. You have a trust set up, great, but you have to align those assets with your plan. Let me give a very quick example. I had someone call me. He was taking care of his aunt the last years of her life. They went online. They did a will, everything to my nephew. She died, and her life insurance policy went to her brother, who she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Why? Because the life insurance policy wasn't governed by the will, and they didn't know that they needed to align the assets with the plan. So it wasn't about getting a will. It was about having a plan that worked.
I've noticed that, with some banks, if they don't have a copy of the trust or whatever paperwork they need, they don't know what to do. So I've heard of people complaining oh, the bank's not giving us the money that we need. And it's well, do they know? Well, no, but I should be able to tell them. It's like, if there's tens of thousands of dollars in there and you're asking the bank just to give it up, like they're on the hook if there's something wrong,
Yeah,
something goes
yeah.
south. Like I'm not, whether you like the bank or not, it's like there's risk tied to it.
Yeah, and I think people are really surprised when they go to the bank and they think they've got the right document, and then they don't, and things don't happen the way that they think it will. Like, for example, powers of attorney. Banks don't like powers of attorney. Maybe eventually it'll work, but they'll make people jump through a lot of legal hoops because they have that liability exposure. Since powers of attorney are more difficult to, they're easier to forge, right? But if you have a trust, you go to the bank, you show the bank your trust documents, they set up an account in the name of your trust. They probably make you notarize something else that says, okay, this is my successor trustee. When your successor trustee walks in the bank already has their information. It's going to be a lot easier for them.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned how someone had like a will, and I get this a lot. People are like, well, if I just have something written that says everything goes to my kid, but that's very different than a trust.
Yes.
Right. Can you kind of explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people think of wills because that's what the media portrays as the main thing.
Okay.
Right. In movies, even in that Taylor Swift song, they were mad at, because I left them out of the will. Someone as rich as Taylor Swift would not just have a will. She would definitely have a trust.
If you want to talk about complicated, hers is probably very complicated.
Yeah, right? So a will, all it does is, it says who you want your stuff to go to. But I think here's the thing people don't realize is that no matter what, the state already has a default plan for you. The default plan is called probate. And your will is just telling the judge, hey, by the way, in a probate matter, this is how I would want my assets to be distributed. It doesn't opt out of probate. And that's what a trust, the primary purpose of a revocable living trust is to opt out of the state's default plan, to opt out of that probate process.
Okay. Yeah, because the probate process is basically now everything has to go in front of a judge, and the judge says, yes, we're following this, or no, we're not. And then I've heard on average it costs like 8 times more.
Well, I think on average in California, I think a good amount is about 5% of market value. So it doesn't matter how much equity you have in a property. Think about what is the average cost of a home in Los Angeles County?
Let's call it $1 million. Actually, right now it's about 900.
Okay, 900.
Yeah.
Or $1 million for easier math, because that's
why
I went to law school.
Let's do $1 million for easy math.
I went to law school because I didn't like math, but 5% of $1 million is not a paltry sum. That's pretty significant. So that is how much probate can potentially cost. And the thing is, probate is it's basically a lawsuit that's filed against your family for the benefit of your creditors. Because one of the primary purposes of probate is to make sure that the people who you owe money to get paid. So it's this public record anyone can see. There are companies that data mine that information. Anyone can come in and file a creditor claim. This person owed me money. And maybe you did owe them money, maybe you didn't, but your family's going to have to litigate that.
Got it. So they either pay it or they have to defend and saying, no, we don't owe this person money.
Yes.
Or how do you prove that? If I decide to go to some random people like, no, dude, they owe me $20. How do they just say, well, we've never heard of Rick. We have no idea how he's tied to this. So why would we pay him? And a judge would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Is that kind of how it would work?
Hopefully. I mean, you would hope. But what if someone shows up with a will that's, I've never heard of this will. You're going to have to go through all of the, legal hoops to either invalidate or prove a will. It could be a total forgery. And that does happen.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Like some uncle shows up saying, oh, she wrote a will before she died and I get the rental property, and those things can be fake, but they still have to be litigated because that's the function of probate.
It's interesting because in LA, as well as Orange County, a lot of California, there was a lot of people who were low income earners, middle class, who bought these homes 100 years ago for like $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a teardown, it's worth 1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been, for the sake of conversation, middle class their entire
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like they died. They may not have thought of this stuff because they're like, I've been a teacher my whole life. I didn't know my house was worth $1.5 million.
Yeah. Or that my family would have to pay $50,000 in probate fees. Like, that's crazy, right? Like my sister is living in her husband's grandfather's home that has been passed down through 3 generations. So the property tax is very, very low. Mm-hmm. But with the recent law changes, it's not going to stay that way.
Yeah.
Prop 19, I think, is something that is like California's new death tax in a way. Mm-hmm. And I think property owners out there really need to understand that the county is very aggressively reassessing property based on Prop 19. I had someone call me and she had done a transfer on death deed, which is basically putting a beneficiary designation on your house. You know, you see these videos on Instagram. There's pros and cons to that. But it's not supposed to result into a reassessment, but she was getting reassessed. And it was going to be a significant amount of money because the home was like 20 years old. So she had to hire me to talk to the county on her behalf because they would not reverse this reassessment.
And that's what the bulk of Prop 19 is, right? It's this idea of a partial reassessment if you keep the property, but if you sell it, then, well, it's a non-event if you sell.
Yeah. So with Prop 19, okay, so let me back up. Before 2021, when parents would pass property to their children, it didn't matter how many properties they had. Their children could inherit and the property tax would stay the same. Mm-hmm. After Prop 19 got passed, when we all saw it on the ballot as the Wildfire Home Protection Act.
God, of course they did. Right? They love to mask things in different ways, and then people don't pay attention, and then it screws things up. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, exactly.
If I ever decide to run for politics, this will be part of my platform. Like, no. Every ballot we have is very crystal clear as to what it is, so that way we're as transparent as possible.
Yeah, you'd think they would do that. But so anyway, it sounded really good on the ballot for a lot of people who didn't know what it was. But what it did was it limited that exemption, that parent to child exemption, so that parents who are passing property to their children, it has to be their primary residence, and then their child has to make it their primary residence, and the exemption is only applicable to $1 million of value. And I think they are adjusting that for inflation a little bit. So it's a little bit over $1 million. It's like $1,100 or whatever. Yeah. But if you think about it, what if the home that you're inheriting has gone up in value $2 million? Then you're paying you're getting reassessed on that extra $1 million. So these are important things for property owners to consider as they're doing their long-term planning, because you don't want your kids to be in a situation where they're relying on rental income, but the rental income won't be the same because the property tax will have gone up.
Now, what have you been seeing in terms of assets being passed down lately? Because my prediction is over the next 5 to 10 years, we're actually going to see a lot more buyers enter the market. Not necessarily because they have higher incomes, but because there's going to be this huge wave of inheritance, right? Millennials' parents are now hitting their 70s, 80s. Grandparents are 90s to 100. And now there's going to be all this influx of wealth coming in that we've never seen before.
Yeah, they're calling it, the Silver Tsunami or something? Yeah. It's the largest wealth transfer between generations. And you better believe the government is trying to put in as many laws as possible to intercept as much of that wealth as they can.
And that's kind of what I was kind of leading to. So I appreciate you kind of segueing into it. So what have you been seeing in terms of some of this trust and estate planning with your clients, knowing that this is coming up?
So let me just clarify. Strategies that I've been implementing, or things that I've been talking to them about, or when I've seen it gone wrong.
Ooh, Gosh, you make it so interesting. Let's do a little bit of all three. So let's first talk about the strategy that you've been implementing with your clients, and then maybe we can tie in, hey, it's because we've seen these mistakes.
Okay. Well, so as far as strategy, if someone has adult children, honestly, the first step is just talking to them, which is crazy, right? But just figuring out, hey, what are your plans? You know, are you gonna move into my house? Are you gonna stay in the state? Are you gonna want to rent this? Because the intention for the future will determine a lot about the strategies that you're going to put in place, and how you want to position the property or set up the trust and do all those things depending on what is intended in the long run. And it's important to know if one of the children want to even stay in the property or not, because that's also avoiding conflict, which is really important. I don't know if you heard the story a couple years ago where there was a house in Orange County and the father passed away. He didn't have a will. One of the children was living in the home, did not want to move, but the siblings were like, no, we're selling it. The appraiser came by, and then the adult child started opening fire.
Oh, and, I did read about that.
Yeah,
that was a while ago.
Yeah. So, conflict can be that's an extreme example, of course.
Sure.
But, if you don't have these conversations, if you don't make these plans, you're just leaving it up to chance that something will happen, that your kids are going to fight over how to go about things.
I see a lot in especially in the forums that I'm a part of for a lot of real estate investors, like, hey, our family just inherited this property. I'd like to buy it for my family, use as a rental. What do you guys think? And, of course, people are like, oh, that's a great idea, blah, blah. I'm like the only one on there that says, actually, I think you should sell. And yes, that's a little bit of a commission whore type deal. And again, these could be not even in LA, but it's also kind of like you're creating conflict. If it appreciates really well in a few years, you're going to build resentment. You're almost like, in most cases, you're probably actually better off just selling, splitting the money, and then just move on.
Yeah. Well, navigating,
keep the family together.
Yeah. So, some things are more important than money, and family relationship is so important. And part of a good estate plan is trying to minimize conflict by addressing these things. And it might not even be just the house. It might be like a family heirloom or mom's wedding ring that people fight over. Siblings have stopped talking to each other because they couldn't agree on who gets dad's tool set.
I remember I know someone, when their family passed away, he had thousands of books. And so it's kind of like, okay, what books do you want? What books do you donate? What books do you sell? Yeah. But you're right. There's all sorts of stuff. You just never know. And if that stuff's not laid out, whether it's valuable or not, because there's some stuff that may not have a lot of I call it external value, right? The outside world may not okay, this is a painting, it's worth $20, but for the family, that can mean everything.
Absolutely. That's why I bring up the yeah.
So then, how do you? Because you don't necessarily walk through these people's homes. So how do you navigate? Right? How do you be well, what about this? What about that? Right?
Just being very.
Oh, you had a car? You had no idea you had a motorcycle.
Oh, that's so funny. No, actually, one time I did do a home visit for an elderly man, and he just pointed at some pottery or I just thought it was like a candy dish. No, they were Native American artifacts, worth tens of thousands of dollars, just sitting around. I was oh my gosh. Yes, that absolutely needs to be accounted for.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it more of is there a general rule of thumb? Hey, hang on, let me backtrack. So is there a rule of thumb of specific items that should be mentioned in a trust based off of, we'll call it external values? Or should it just look, everything in there, all the clothes, all this, all that, it needs to go to their designated people?
So what usually happens with trusts is that the trust will own all the personal property. Right. And then it's up to the person to kind of have a personal property memorandum that links with the trust so that they can do specific gifts of personal property. But, you might want to add in specific things if they're significant enough. I had one client who had like a slot machine, that might have been fought over. So we just put that right in there.
Yeah.
Because he had very clear ideas of who should get it. But, like you said, it could be sentimental. It could be jewelry. Jewelry is a big thing, and you want to have a plan where it's flexible enough that you're not going to have to amend it formally every single time you want to like change something that small, but it should still work, and it should be flexible enough to accommodate those changes. So, and then just reviewing plans. Actually, I probably should mention that way in the beginning. I said that assets not being aligned was one of the reasons plans fail the most. And just for everyone listening, the top 3 reasons that I've seen plans fail is 1, they're out of date. 2, the assets aren't aligned. And 3, sometimes they're just not right because there are a lot of one-size-fits-all documents out there. And the one-size-fits-all documents make assumptions, and those assumptions may or may not be right. And when they're not right, they're really not right. And then the family winds up in conflict or court. So, whoever is out there and they're trying to think about like, how do I set this up? Definitely work with an attorney. Don't use ChatGPT.
Right? I hear people like, oh yeah, I can just get it done for $900. I'm like, whether you realize it or not, you probably have $1 million worth of assets, right? If it's your house you've lived in forever, I'm like, I'm no knock on those, but like, do you really? Like, I remember when we did our trust, I will admit it felt very boilerplate. When I was like review, I'm like, it feels like you did plug and play, but it was very specific and it outlined everything. And I remember paying like $2,000 or something like that. I'm like, this feels expensive, but at least I know an attorney reviewed it.
Yeah.
Right? Well, it's kind of like that peace of mind.
Yeah, the peace of mind is important. And working with an attorney who isn't going to, ghost you after you've done everything. Right. So, an attorney who has a built-in system to review your plan every few years, 3 to 5 years is good. My own firm has no cost review every 3 years. There are many attorneys in California who also follow that relational model. You have to kind of ask, though. You have to ask the questions. Do your due diligence in asking attorneys those questions. Do you have any, how do you make sure that my plan stays current? How do you help me make sure my plan works? Because it's not just about the documents. And I think that is what if anyone takes anything away from this, is estate planning is not about the documents. It's about the plan that needs to work. The documents are just the tools. Right. It's the strategy. It's like when you sell a house, you could put a sign in front and that's it, right?
Hope for the best.
And hope for the best. That's like a one size generic, will document. Or you could work with a good realtor who will, actually talk you through the different strategy and figure out like what do you really care about and what should we be, doing with all this.
Sure.
A lot different.
So you mentioned reviewing every 3 to 5 years. What would be examples of major life changes? I mean, the first thing that pops in my mind is kids versus grandkids, but what else would be like a major change that would trigger, oh snap, I should be updating this?
That's a really great question so divorce is one thing.
That's fair.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. I've talked to people who've been divorced for years and they've never changed their plan, and it's still their ex who has the right to make medical decisions for them.
So you better end on good terms.
Yeah, right?
Right.
Yeah. So divorce, marriage.
Okay.
Right? Divorce, marriage, birth of a child, of course. Buying new property, selling property, starting a business, selling a business. Yeah, major life changes. People who, and here's not as common, or people don't think about it as much, is when the people that you've designated as like successor trustees move away
Mm,
or the relationship changes.
good point.
Well, yeah, I was talking to someone who I think her grandfather had named someone who was a friend long time ago and now is, people drift apart. They're like no longer there's this person who like she has no relationship with, who her grandfather probably hadn't spoken to in like more than a few decades. And
Yeah.
he is the trustee of the trust. And she has to go to this guy and have him and do everything for their family.
Couldn't he relinquish himself and reassign it?
Yes. But is he?
Well,
He
fair,
might
right? Because
not.
there's the
Yeah.
executor fee. So if there's a
Yeah.
big
Fair enough.
enough
Yeah. He might
deal,
not.
it's like he may say, well, screw it, I'll collect the executor fee, I'll take care of this, and
Mm-hmm.
call it, especially if it's super simple.
Yeah. So
And
yeah. And so I think another thing to think about is there's a more modern strategy with trust planning called the trust protector. This
okay.
is relatively new. You don't see these in the older trusts, but a trust protector is basically designating the attorney to do things like name a new trustee, possibly,
Mm-hmm.
or name an independent trustee if the existing trustee is, you know, resigns or isn't doing a good job. So you don't have to go spend a bunch of legal fees going to court to make that change. So
Mm.
there are a lot of strategies again to make plans solid but flexible, and it's a matter of working with the right attorney
Yeah.
to talk you through all this and to guide you through this. And I think I'd also say, like, there are many different kinds of attorneys out there, and the attorneys that we see on TV who are defending people in a criminal trial are not necessarily the same kind of attorneys you want doing your life and legacy plan.
Right. It's interesting about the flexibility part, because I remember talking to one of my clients years ago, and he's like, yeah, we specify the kids' names in the trust, because he's like, I don't want some random person to claim to be my kid after I'm gone and be like, no, I'm his long lost, son from a different mom and blah, blah, blah. And I remember when we talked to our attorney about that, I was like, I don't want that to happen, because as far as I'm concerned, this is my only daughter. And he was saying, well, we did put in there that there had to be some sort of like defined relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like, yeah, even if you did have someone out there and you had no idea and the DNA matched, but because you never had a relationship. But I always wondered about that. I was like, no, wouldn't it be better to be as specific as possible? So like every time you have a new kid, add the kid in.
Well, but what if something happens in between? Kobe Bryant's youngest daughter was left out of his trust. She was 6 months old when he passed away, and his widow had to go to court and petition to have her added.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do is I create an afterborn, like if there are children born of this marriage, they are
Fair.
included. So
Okay.
That kind of creates a little bit of a stopgap. So in between the time that there's a new child born and you're able to actually get to your attorney and make all those changes, there's at least a safety net and those kinds of things. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I didn't know about the 6-month-old.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild, because who knows how much money was involved in that and how all that was delegated. I mean, we think our trusts are complicated. I can only imagine what it is for like athletes and basically people of like ultra high net worth. Because I've even heard banks will become the executors of trusts.
Yes, that's also possible. I mean, the independent fiduciary thing. But the thing is, like, celebrities who have tons of money, they make the same common mistakes that we do when it comes to estate planning.
Sure.
I think because traditionally the way estate planning has been done. So you'll see things like, what's his name? The Black Panther actor.
Oh, Chadwick
Boseman.
Chadwick Boseman. Yeah, Boseman, yeah.
He had a terminal illness. So obviously he set up an estate plan. But there was almost $1 million that was not included in his trust plan. So his widow had to go through probate on that $1 million. How do I know this? Because probate's public record. So even celebrities facing a terminal illness may not get all those.
It's not their wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So,
and it may not be the business manager's wheelhouse. It may not be, whoever's wheelhouse. I mean, I
mm-hmm,
can only imagine, especially for athletes. I hear it's super
mm-hmm,
common where, like, they didn't come from a lot of money. And all of a sudden, here's a contract for the NFL, for $10 million to go play football for a few years. It's like they don't
mm-hmm.
have their stuff together
Yeah.
because they wouldn't even think about it. Because it's like, oh, this would never happen to me. I know people because, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm a smart ass, now I know it all. The limit is 180,000, right? For
So
probate?
it used to be. So
Used to
before,
be. Ah, this
you're
is
so
this is why I
close.
ask.
You're
So
so close.
close.
Yeah, it changed like last year, but
Okay, so I'm not too far off.
you're not too far off. But it used to be 185,000 regardless of like anything, which was
Right.
crazy because there's no real estate in California worth less than 185,000. So
Right.
they changed it. So if you have real property that's 750,000 or less, it can go through a quote unquote abbreviated probate, which
Okay.
I don't know what that means. It's still probate in some sense.
Right.
And also 750,000, that's not even the average home of a average value of a home in California, but whatever. And then on top of that, there's like another amount of non real estate. So you can put everything together. It is higher than 185,000. I think it's like 200 now, 200,000. So yes, but no, but you're close. You're so close.
So close. So close. Thank you for amusing me. I appreciate that. She's like in the background, it's like this idiot. But that's cool. That's cool.
No. Like I said, it was just last year.
Right. Just a few months ago. So what do you see going forward? Right? Because again, Silver Tsunami, what do you see that's going to be happening in the trust world?
I think it'll be more important than ever for
Sure.
people to find attorneys who will be trusted advisors, counselors who
Mm-hmm.
are going to be there, not just for a one and done document preparation, but who are going to be able to, check in with them, have these reviews, because the laws are going to change a lot. I was just meeting with a client and, retirement accounts are governed by the Secure Act, which just came into effect like 2019 and has gone through a few different iterations. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's to the point where it's kind of settled. I've changed a lot of the custom language to match all of those legal changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a couple come in and they had very large retirement account. I'm like, we really need to adjust this because the law has changed since then.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking about how the government is always trying to take as much money as possible during that wealth transfer, if you have a trusted attorney on your side who's looking out for these things, who can flag these things, who can be proactive, I think that will help families preserve their family wealth, and less will go to the government, just like with the Prop 19 stuff. If the transfer of the property isn't handled right, the county may partially reassess. And I've seen it happen. And it's unfortunate because it's a lot of money that the family could have saved if they had the right legal guidance.
Yeah. Or they may not have the money, to be fair, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
We talk about some of this money being transferred when they were middle class all their lives.
Yeah.
They may not
fair.
have the difference. Even if it was justifiable, and then they're like forced to sell and all that, which again, I know I do usually recommend most people sell, but there are times when it may not. I mean, I remember, think about it. If you have a house in Beverly Hills that you inherited, that may be the only opportunity you have. Tone, you may not want to sell it.
Yeah. But if it's not handled right, you might need to sell it anyway. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So what that reminds me of this story, I think there was this family, there was a house, there were two children, and one child did not want it and the other one needed to move in because this was their only opportunity for home ownership.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we have to, do these certain things to make sure that the property tax doesn't go up. And they were like, nah, we can do it ourselves. And the child who was supposed to move in, he called me like 6 months later and was like, the property tax got reassessed. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you because you've already done the transfer and you didn't do it the way that I was advising. So, he probably doesn't, I mean, he was like right on the cusp. He's like, this is the only way I can get a house. This is the only thing I can afford. But if the property taxes go up, that throws off everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially because in California, we have that 2% cap each year for property taxes going up. So it's like, you'll never actually meet the actual value of the property. So if you're the county, the state, it's like, yeah, we need to make it up somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, they're getting very, very aggressive with the reassessments, especially in LA County. When you put your house in a trust, like a revocable living trust, it's not supposed to result in a reassessment. But I still have some clients still get a notice because, I don't know, maybe the county's like, let's just see, let's just see if we can get away with it.
Test the waters.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Now, talking about property, what happens if like nobody claims the property, right? So somebody passes away and then there's almost like, well, who owns the house? Like I know I've met elderly people where they've never talked about friends, family, whatever. And I've always wondered, like, when that time happens, what's next?
If there's no estate plan, if they haven't opted out of the government's default plan, it'll go through probate. And usually in probate, they have the intestacy laws where, according to the law, they'll try to find the nearest living relative. And if they can't, then it escheats to the state. So that's one big thing. But I think another thing to keep in mind is it's not just that, it's property that is unidentified. Okay. So there is, I think over 20 billion or $10 billion in California's Department of Unclaimed Property. Okay. Meaning someone died and the account went stagnant and then it just falls into this black hole of a department that California makes interest off of. And in this time of paperless statements, like imagine something happens to you, you don't have your accounts all written out. And how is anyone going to know what you own if all of your statements are paperless and they can't wait for something to come in the mail to say, I see. Mom had a bank account at this bank. No, they'd have to like figure out your email and which email. Some of us have multiple emails. Some of us have this is the email I use with my banks. Would they even know that? How would they get into those accounts? How would they know they existed? Okay. Yeah. And
so then, I mean, at some point, so like the state then just holds on to these properties if they're like 100%.
So like the unclaimed property just sits there. Yeah. Just sits there making interest for California. Yeah.
But then so nobody maintains the property. It just kind of rots away.
In the Department of are we talking?
Sorry, for both, right? So like if the house becomes unclaimed, now the state's just earning interest, but who's taking care of the house itself?
I'd imagine that the state would probably sell it and take the money or something. Yeah.
Got it. Who knows? Okay, so they would act on it. It's not just like they just let the house rot.
No, not the rot. No, but I'm talking more like bank accounts or retirement accounts. Those often do fall into the Department of Unclaimed Property. And it's tough to get those things out. But as far as real estate, that the state will just take ownership and do whatever because who knows. Maybe some politician will get a vacation home.
Yeah, right. That's probably what it is. Mm-hmm. So it's a bummer. All right. Okay. So let's talk briefly. You wrote a book.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about it.
So I wrote a book called Your After Credit Scene, A Nerd's Guide to Wills, Trusts, and Legacy. And basically my goal with this book was to make estate planning a little less scary and a little bit more relatable by explaining estate planning using pop culture references and storytelling. So I've got some Star Wars analogies in there, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, because I'm a big nerd. I go to Comic-Con. I have a booth at LA Comic-Con every year. So if you...
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, if you go to LA Comic-Con, come find me.
Okay.
But yeah, because it's just an intimidating topic. It's hard for people to wrap their minds around it, and it's not easy to understand. So I break it down pretty simply, like what is estate planning, why estate planning, what are some of the myths. I go through kind of different family dynamics, what parents need to know about it, what single people need to know about it, because single people think, oh, if I'm single, I don't need to, do an estate plan, or if I'm unmarried, I'm fine. But that's not true. Just kind of explaining those things, and then why you shouldn't DIY your estate plan, and then some tips to when you're looking for an attorney, what are some red flags and what are some green flags, just to help people navigate all that.
Nice. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, they can just go to my website, amo-law.com, and everything's on the website.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really helpful. And thank you everyone for watching or listening. And I'll talk to you guys next week. Want to keep unlocking the secrets to building real wealth in Los Angeles? Stick around for the next episode. Tap the video on screen to keep watching.